So good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Is the audio okay? Good. So thank you very much, Alan and CitA, for inviting me here today. Alan mentioned that the first speaker is a motivational speaker, so I'm going to do my best to motivate you all. I'm not going to get you to stand up or move your arms or anything like that, but we'll see. If anybody's nodding off, I might introduce that. Alan introduced me very comprehensively, so I'm not going to go over that again. As Alan said, I am a BIM consultant. I'm Managing Director of Digital Build Consultants, and I've been working in the construction industry for over 25 years. Of the 25 years, 13 of those have been in BIM implementation. So what I'm going to speak to you today about is implementing BIM within an organisation, whether it's a small to medium enterprise, in a strategic way, so that you're setting up to succeed. And as a BIM consultancy, we work with all stakeholders in the sector. So we work with clients on advising them on how to implement BIM on projects. We advise consultants, architects, engineers on how to implement BIM within their business, and then also how to execute BIM on projects. And then we also work with contractors, main contractors, subcontractors, in helping them to implement BIM, again, within their organisation and on projects. So I suppose what I will hope to share with you today is my experience from working with all aspects of the sector in how to implement BIM in a strategic way. So what I would say is, and hopefully a takeaway from this talk this morning, is some pointers or some tips on how to set up to succeed and how to implement building information modelling processes within your business in a strategic way or strategically. And that, I suppose, through experience working in the industry for the last 13 or so years, I've seen a lot of organisations who start to implement BIM in an ad hoc way, and they are effectively setting up to fail because they don't have a plan or a roadmap on how to implement BIM strategically within the organisation. So I'm going to hopefully give you some pointers on that. As I said, the first thing I would say is set yourself up to succeed. So look at small things that you can do within the organisation to help you on your BIM and digital transition journey. And I'll talk more in more detail about that as we go through the presentation. The other thing I would suggest is to appoint a BIM consultant. Obviously there is a capital investment in appointing a BIM consultant, but a small amount of consultancy at the very start of your journey will help it run much more smoothly. And then the last thing I'd say is take a step-by-step approach. Don't try and do everything all at once. Don't try and bite a big chunk out of the apple, because it's going to be very hard to keep the momentum going with that. And again, I'm going to talk through that step-by-step approach now. And I suppose by way of an agenda or what I hope to talk about today, these are the steps for implementing BIM and digital construction within your organisation. So I'm going to talk about the vision, and Alan mentioned that earlier as part of the digital series. Vision and having kind of a focus on where you want to see yourself in the future is the starting point. I'm going to talk about an implementation team who you can identify within your organisation to help support that journey through your digital transition. I'm also going to discuss a gap analysis and how we would approach looking at gaps within your business and then how to fill those gaps with an implementation roadmap. There are challenges to this, and I want to highlight those challenges and maybe help give you some advice and guidance on how to overcome the challenges. And then I'll talk a little bit more about how we actually develop a strategy for a business when we're working with them. And then, as Alan mentioned again, I'll identify some support streams that are available to the industry currently. And then lastly, I'll just mention BIM certification. It might be something that you want to strive for in the future as you implement BIM within your company. So I suppose breaking that down into each of those steps. The first one is define the vision. So what do you see your company doing in the future? Where are the opportunities for your business? So looking at strengths, weaknesses and opportunities and threats within the industry, and then identifying what your vision for digital construction and BIM is. And at this stage, it's really important to be realistic. So if you want to have everybody, using handheld devices on site and all of that, is that something that's realistic for your business? Can you afford the investment in the hardware and the software and all of that? So just make sure that when you're looking at the opportunities for the future, that you're realistic about what the vision for your company is. And then make sure that it's attainable. And that's something that through discussion and involvement from various stakeholders within the business, you can start to define. And I would say that is the first step. See where your company needs to be in the future by doing a SWOT analysis, and then make sure it's realistic and attainable. The next step then is to identify internal stakeholders who can help with your implementation journey. There's lots of research around BIM implementation, and one of the findings from the research is that a top-down approach supports successful implementation. So having somebody at senior management level or directorship level who is driving BIM within the organisation. They don't need to get involved in the nitty-gritty aspects of BIM implementation, but that there is support there from the senior management to drive BIM within the organisation. So a BIM champion or a BIM sponsor. Then we would always recommend that you would identify somebody within the organisation to take on the role of BIM manager. And I know a lot of small and medium-sized companies get a bit overwhelmed by the idea of having a BIM manager. Is it somebody we have to take on? Is it an extra resource? Depending on the size of your company and what your implementation strategy is, it may be somebody that's already identified in-house. Somebody that can maybe spare part-time at the early stages of the implementation journey to get involved. And really what you're looking for is somebody who's enthusiastic about building information modelling, has an interest in implementing it within the organisation, and also that they have a good understanding of your business. A BIM sponsor or champion, then a BIM manager who will help drive BIM implementation within the organisation. And the BIM manager will get involved in the day-to-day implementation aspects. And then I think this part of the implementation team is really important. It's to engage with business unit stakeholders. So if you have people within your organisation who are responsible for quality, for example, or health and safety, or have a particular role that's important to the business, engage them in the implementation process. It needs to be holistic. It needs to stretch out to all aspects of your business. It's not just your drafting department or your site team or whatever. It needs to be involved in all aspects of your business. So again, that's just a high-level organogram for a BIM implementation team within your organisation. The next step then is, once you have this team and you have them engaged, is to start looking at where the gaps are within the organisation. So you've decided what your vision is, so now you need to look at where are you currently, and then what are the gaps between your vision and where you currently are. So the first thing that we would do is define the goals for BIM implementation. So what are the things that you need to have in place? What are the steps that you need to take to implement BIM to meet that vision that you're hoping for? Assess capability. So do you have internal capability already? Are there people within the organisation that have brought skills with them from maybe third level or from a previous employer? So it's getting a cross-section or a good idea of what the capability is of your organisation as it stands. You may be surprised that there is skills that you weren't aware of. And one thing that is important to realise about BIM implementation is that it's not just about the software. We're not talking about implementing 3D modelling and clash detection and coordination solely on its own. What we're talking about is implementing the processes that support working within those tools in a collaborative environment, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So what are your existing processes? How do you actually produce, manage and exchange information on your projects currently? And what are the workflows that you have? Because, as I said, to understand how to get to your vision, you need to understand where you are currently. And then identify gaps in capability and in your processes and software, etc. So I suppose to understand where your resources are and your workforce is currently, we talk about BIM maturity in the industry, and BIM maturity is identifying what level of capability and capacity you have for building information modelling, both internally in your own processes and also working on projects. So when we look at the BIM maturity, we look at people, processes and technology. So going back to that point I made a few minutes ago, it's not just about the software, it's not just about 3D modelling. So what skills do you have? Do you have skills to use the BIM tools or to use platforms that allow you to work collaboratively, so common data environments? And is there knowledge within the organisation on BIM processes? So is there awareness of the industry standard for information management? Those kind of questions. And then is there experience and knowledge of coordination and working within a 3D environment to work with different stakeholders and different members of the supply chain? And then is there experience and knowledge of collaboration, being able to work together with other disciplines within the organisation and with other stakeholders? So is there knowledge of how to work collaboratively and how to share information that's useful for other stakeholders through the life cycle of a project? And then is there experience within the organisation? Have people worked on previous BIM projects? What types of projects have they worked on? So they're the kind of main things that we would look at when we're assessing BIM maturity. So again, trying to identify those gaps. Where are you at now? Where do you need to get to meet the vision for the company? And then we would look at the overall organisational capability by looking at your current workflows and processes, what areas of BIM are relevant to you as an organisation. So an example is a small subcontractor who is providing a certain amount of construction for a project. They may not necessarily need to model to be engaged in the BIM process, but they may need to know how to work collaboratively, how to share information in a common data environment. So it's making sure that the areas of BIM that are relevant to that business are supported and developed as part of the implementation journey. We also look at individual capability. So do you have the resources that you need to be able to meet the goals of your implementation? And if not, how do you fill those gaps and how do you fill the resource gap? And then also, do you have the hardware and the software and the security around working in a virtual digital environment collaboratively? So all of those things are brought together when we're doing a gap analysis to identify where there's certain aspects of support needed or training or whatever it is to bridge that gap. So once we've set the vision, we've looked at the gaps within the company, it's then important to identify what goals and objectives you want. So obviously the vision is that high level. We want to be working collaboratively with all our stakeholders in 2 years' time or whatever it is. The goals and objectives then are more specific. They're more project and task orientated. So some examples there. I'm not going to read all of them. I'm sure that the slides are going to be available after the presentation. But the goals and objectives should be specific to your business. So what do you need to do within your business? So if you're a contractor, do you want to use building information modelling to reduce reworking, to reduce RFIs, to coordinate better? What do you need to do to be able to be involved in the BIM process within the construction industry? So, and those goals and objectives are identified through workshops and discussion to see where your business needs are. And the result of the setting the vision, looking at the gap analysis within the business is that an implementation roadmap is developed to help with your implementation journey. And the important thing about an implementation roadmap is to look at short, medium and long-term goals for the company. As I said at the very start, if you try to do everything at once, you're setting up to fail. Whereas if you look at short, medium and long-term goals, you can achieve the short-term goals very soon into your journey, and that will give encouragement to the business to continue on the journey. So we would normally say short-term goals are within 3 months of developing your implementation roadmap. Medium, 3 to 6 months, and then long-term, you're looking at 6 to 12 months or 24 months. So having a roadmap with short, medium and long-term goals helps with the enthusiasm for implementation. Then using key performance indicators to monitor the success of implementation. So having KPIs for your short-term goals will then again give that encouragement and drive to move on to the next stage for your medium and long-term goals. And then outside of the kind of strategic approach, in order to engage with building information modelling within the industry, there are international standards, ISO 19650, and with the ISO 19650 standards, there is standard documentation that is required to develop and produce on projects so that you can engage with collaboration and working with the supply chain on your projects. So having template documentation for those industry required documents will help for a consistent approach to your projects and also a smoother transition to implementing BIM on your projects. Another aspect of the implementation roadmap is to have a training plan. So when we spoke earlier about people, process and technology, it's important not to forget the people. And if you want to bring people along with you on your implementation journey, it's important to support them and to provide training for them to engage in that journey. And it's not just software training. If you're implementing new processes or you're rolling out template documentation, it's important to train the team in what that documentation is, the importance of it, and also how to fill it out, where it is it stored in your knowledge management system or your quality management system. So the training is not just software training. And then lastly, I would recommend with an implementation roadmap is before you actually roll out your BIM processes on live projects, that you would consider a pilot project. So even looking at a project that you've completed and you want to trial the BIM processes on it in a kind of a lab type environment, or a project that has a timeline that allows for rolling out processes and a bit of lessons learned and improvement as you go through. It's very few projects that have that buffer of time, so definitely picking the right pilot project is important when implementing BIM within your organisation. As I said, there are challenges. And I'm sure there's a lot of you in the room who are going, yeah, no, we've had these challenges, or depending on where you are in your implementation journey. The one that I hear the most, and you'll certainly see research-wise as well, is resistance from the team, resistance from people in-house. I've been doing this, I've been working on construction projects for 30 years, and we've always been able to build them, and we haven't made too many mistakes, and so resistance for change from the team is probably one of the biggest challenges to implementation. And what I would suggest is that using a change management model to help with that is a really good strategy for implementation. There are lots of change management models around. ADCAR is probably one of the most well-known, and it talks about engaging the staff, making sure that they get the right knowledge and information about the changes that are happening, and that they are part of the process. That's just a very high-level summary of it. Obviously there's much more, and people do masters in change management, so I'm not going to go into it today. Lack of skills then is also another challenge, and certainly across the industry it's a challenge in all areas of construction. So I suppose having the resources and the time for upskilling is a critical challenge to implementation within the construction industry and within your business. But providing that time for upskilling is going to save time in the future. If you've implemented BIM in a strategic way, you will start to see success with implementation very early on in your journey. So putting that time into upskilling your teams is a really important aspect. Lack of understanding of the BIM process, again, is another big one for the industry. And there's a lot of people within the industry who don't really know what building information modelling is about. They think it's a 3D model, whereas if there's a better understanding across the organisation, then there is a better opportunity for implementing BIM strategically within the organisation. So training in what the BIM process is all about, that it's not just the technology, it's about the efficiencies of working collaboratively with other stakeholders in on a project, and sharing useful information through a single source of information in your common data environment. Having that understanding across the organisation will help with meeting those challenges for implementation. The other one is outside of your business, where there are challenges, is resistance to collaboration with other stakeholders, or resistance from other team members to collaborate with you. So it's a really important aspect of building information modelling is sharing useful information in a common data environment when it's needed. And if all the stakeholders in the project aren't doing that, then it's going to cause challenges to implementing BIM on a project. So it's trying to get rid of that adversarial environment and having a much more open sharing of information for the right reasons, for the right purposes. And the last one, and again, there's probably people in the room who have had bad experiences of building information modelling when implemented on projects, and it's the perception of BIM. Like, as I said, I've been implementing BIM for over 13 years, and I thought 13 years ago, this is a no-brainer for the industry. I can't believe that we haven't all just engaged with it and got on board with it. But because building information modelling hasn't been implemented strategically, like we were saying earlier. There's been a lot of examples of projects where BIM was implemented in an ad hoc way, where there wasn't the processes and the documentation to support implementing BIM in a structured way, following standards, so following ISO 19650. And it's those bad experiences that people have had in the past have influenced their decision to implement BIM now. So what I would hope from this presentation is that those bad experiences can be eliminated, and that if you think about implementing BIM in a strategic way to set up to succeed, that you can implement it correctly and efficiently for the organisation. I'm not going to dwell on this. Again, this is more just for the slides for you to have afterwards. But a typical BIM implementation strategy development starts with a workshop with the company, with the organisation, with key stakeholders involved. So going back to that BIM implementation organogram, having business units that have an input into the workflows and processes in the company is great to get them involved at that early stage when doing the BIM maturity assessment and identifying the gaps within the organisation. So engaging with those stakeholders at that very early stage is important to developing that implementation strategy. And then developing the roadmap based on the goals and objectives for the organisation, and engaging then with that implementation team right through that process, so that there is a feedback opportunity and input from all of the stakeholders. So there's kind of three main steps to developing an implementation strategy and roadmap. So doing the gap analysis and maturity assessment, then making recommendations to fill those gaps, and then getting feedback from the organisation, from the business, to make sure that that strategy is going to work for them. And I suppose just a few kind of takeaways from the implementation, or kind of key considerations for implementation. The first thing I would say is set up for success. So implement BIM in a strategic way, and also support that with good communication. So looking at a change management approach, where you're engaging with the staff and the stakeholders within the business. Create an awareness for the need for BIM. So if people know what BIM is about and how it can improve the business, then they'll be more engaged and more willing to get on board with it. Support change and encourage a desire for adoption. So if there are people within your organisation who have an interest in a particular aspect of BIM, so maybe it's a quantity surveyor in your company who is interested in 5D, that they're doing their own research in it, encourage that and try and engage them in the implementation process. And then provide coaching, practice, and really importantly, time. You're not going to be able to flick a switch and turn BIM on. So having an implementation roadmap with short, medium and long-term goals will help you to set up to succeed and implement BIM in a strategic way. And then just lastly, a couple of slides on the support that's available currently to the industry. So for Enterprise Ireland clients, there is two support funds from Enterprise Ireland. So the first one is BIM Enable. And BIM Enable is 7 days of consultancy with an Enterprise Ireland approved BIM consultant, and Enterprise Ireland will provide funding for that BIM consultancy. And basically what happens with BIM Enable is what I've just described to you there. So that initial workshop and gap analysis, then the implementation strategy and roadmap, and the engagement with the organisation. So that's the first kind of round of funding that Enterprise Ireland provide. And then based on that strategic plan and roadmap, there's also BIM Implement funding available from Enterprise Ireland, which will support any rollout of training that's needed to meet the short, medium and long-term goals of the BIM Enable strategic plan and roadmap. So that's Enterprise Ireland. The funding that they provide, so for BIM Enable, they provide, as I said, they cover 7 days of BIM consultancy, and they will provide €6,300 worth of fund for an €8,400 consultancy engagement. Then with BIM Implement, depending on the size of your company and how Enterprise Ireland categorise your company, they'll provide support for the implementation training. And just one thing I would highlight in the BIM Implement is that the funding is, it covers the direct cost and the indirect cost of training. So it'll cover the third-party BIM consultancy or BIM training provider, and also the time that your staff are away from their desks and being productive, and that they're in the training. So very supportive funding from Enterprise Ireland, but it is only available currently to Enterprise Ireland clients, so those who are exporting outside of Ireland. But I know through the Build Digital project there is talk of Enterprise Ireland looking internally with that as well. But I don't have any update on that. Alan mentioned the Build Digital project, so I just wanted to mention it again as an important aspect of implementation support. Having a national centre of excellence for building information modelling and digital construction is really going to help with that implementation across the industry. If we're all doing it the same way and we're consistent across all aspects of the industry, then we're going to be able to work collaboratively and share information as we go through the implementation process. Alan also mentioned the SkillNet funding, so there's CitA SkillNet BIM training support, and there's the CP, the Construction Professionals SkillNet funding support for BIM training as well. And then very lastly, I know probably over time now, for those people who've already started their BIM implementation journey, one thing that might be of interest to you is looking at BIM certification. So looking for an independent accreditation for BIM certification. So it's to this standard, ISO 19650. And what that looks at when you're being audited is it looks at your quality management system. So if you have ISO 9001 accreditation, that helps with your ISO 19650 BIM accreditation. If you don't have ISO 9001, again, you can still go for BIM certification, where you just need to demonstrate your quality management system that you have implemented in your organisation, and then demonstrate your compliance with ISO 19650, the information management standard, and also your CPD policy, how you support your staff to give them the skills to work with building information modelling processes on projects. And there's a few organisations that will provide certification. So here in Ireland, the National Standards Authority of Ireland provide BIM certification. It's a two-stage audit, similar to ISO 9001. BSI, BRE and Lloyds in the UK also provide BIM certification. And with that, I'm going to leave it at that. So thank you very much, everyone.